You have questions, we have answers. Back with another quick clip. The question I have for you today is, oftentimes there's a financial spouse and a non-financial spouse. And this individual is asking, since I'm the financial spouse, I'm concerned should something happen to me, what should I be thinking about as I transition that responsibility over to my wife, because she's the non-financial spouse in this example? What are some of your thoughts or suggestions?
Brian, it's a good question. And when you have a death of a spouse, especially the financial spouse, the emotions for losing a loved one can totally overwhelm. So, taking a step back, one of the things we really encourage is for both spouses to be involved in the finances, to both spouses to understand where assets are custodied, who to contact, how properties are titled, etc. And in addition, if spouses have children or a trusted loved one or friend who might be that successor executor or get involved in the estate administration process, we encourage that at the very least, the advisor's contact information be shared with that trusted loved one or individual.
So Nick, like you said, dealing in a state of grief, nobody makes good decisions when they're in a state of grief. It's a terrible time. And certainly for someone who is now just absolutely completely lost, right? Maybe they just had the funeral, they're going through that grieving process. Now they're turning their attention to their financial situation. Where do they even start?
The first step that really should be taken is to gather the estate documents and other important documents that you'll need throughout the process in one centralized place. So the estate documents, meaning an original copy of the will, any revocable or irrevocable trusts that were created during that spouse's lifetime. In many cases, those documents are somewhere within the family's possession in a safe place. But if they're not, often the attorney that drafted the documents may have those documents in a secure vault at the law firm. As far as other documents that might be needed, just to name a few, copies of the death certificate, maybe 10 to 12 copies, tax returns, investment statements, bank accounts, property titles, etc.
Pulling together all of those important documents are absolutely critical. And as you said earlier, being proactive can make all the difference in the world. And I know that's what we do for clients, making sure that they have that game plan and everything's tied together. And so to your point, if they don't have one, working with the team can make all the difference in the world. What about when that deceased spouse is still working? Does that change things a bit? Other things or considerations they need to take into account?
Absolutely. If the deceased spouse was still working, the surviving spouse should contact the prior employer and set up a conversation with someone in human resources. There are a number of items that might need to be addressed. One could be life insurance that was either provided through the employer or purchased through the employer. In addition, if the surviving spouse and the deceased spouse were covered under the health insurance of the employer, there's going to be decisions that need to be made around COBRA continuing coverage. There could be retirement plans in place, a 401k, pension, etc., that need to be addressed. In addition to that, it's worth contacting prior employers before this most recent employer in case there's other retirement plans that are out there. And then on the flip side, for the surviving spouse, if they're covered under a health plan at their current employer, this is a qualifying life event where changes to the health insurance can be made.
Nick, that's a great point. You mentioned earlier, you said, having a list of numbers and contact information on who to call. And a lot of times people think of that as, maybe another doctor or family and loved ones, but having the contact of somebody in HR at that individual's place of employment makes all the sense in the world. And so that's an excellent tip. Anything else that you want to share with us before we let you go?
One thing I would say, part of the process, gathering the list of assets, it can be difficult and sometimes overwhelming, especially if you're not involved in the finances. So getting a prior couple years tax returns, there's schedules and statements in there that give clues as to where assets are, what debts might be out there, where there's investments. In addition to checking the filing cabinets, the family computer, etc. That tax return has some really important information in it. And then one last thing, the process, it's an emotional time. The estate process can be overwhelming and confusing. It really is important, and it sounds so simple, to really just take it one day at a time, one step at a time, and you can get through it.
Those are great tips, Nick. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Brian, for having me.
If you or anyone else has questions they'd like answers to, please feel free to email us at qa@Mariner Wealth Advisors.com. Thanks for watching.